Chapter 18 On the Road. Everything was different. We were faster without our youngest and oldest, but now we were without deep roots, without the acute need to protect and make better. And I had taken up a spot that opened up in the middle of it all, somewhere between desperation and resolve. We decided to find the resistance, and we knew there was a pocket of it near Espanola. We needed information to figure out which school Minerva would have been taken to. Chiboy and Meg never questioned the plan. We moved the same way as always, Meg as our leader, Chiboy as the scout, and now I was with them, helping to shape our path forward. After all, I was the one who had put us here. It was a burden so heavy I could barely sleep at night for lack of breath. What if I was leading us to our deaths? What if we were walking into a place full of more trickster Indians? What if there were no Indians at all? Instead of sleep, I counted the stars and kept 6 on the individual breathing of each remaining member sleeping in their tents around me. The weather was shifting fast, and you couldn't see your breath anymore, not even in the hour before the sun rose. Meg and I were out collecting water from our tart traps when we found the first sign we were getting close. French, here. He motioned over to a thin elm in front of a semicircle of pine. He pointed out a small dent in the side of the trunk. I bent closer, and the dent turned into a scar, and the scar revealed itself to be a series of deliberate cuts. What is it? Meg ran his fingers over the mark and gave a short laugh. Huh, I think they're syllabics. What's that? That's our written language. I reached out to feel the language on my skin for the first time since Minerva had breathed her words over my forehead when she thought I was sleeping during her nightly check-ins. An arrow, a line, and a couple of dots. What does it mean? I don't know syllabics. Isaac was the linguist, but I do know that it means there are Nish close by who do. He sounded more hopeful about an impending meeting than I would have imagined, especially after the last one. Maybe he felt something in the tree that I didn't. The next day we spent taking stock and repacking our gear. We needed to know exactly what we had if we were getting close to Espanola, and we needed to make sure there was nothing unnecessary left in our packs. Speed and agility were the benefits of a tighter group, and we needed both now. Hey, French, do you want to come with me to look for mushrooms? It was Rose. Something about her voice made my neck prickle. It had to be her voice because there was nothing exciting about looking for squat fungus in the bush. Sure, I tried to play it cool. We didn't have much time to hang out these days, not with the ferocious pace I'd set and the breadth of my self-assigned duties. Moodiness, anxiety for the safety of every person, insomnia. So go then. She motioned to me to follow with a tilt of her head, her long hair loose against her faded gray t-shirt. I got up from where I'd sat up by the tent to count and recount ammo and followed her through the pines. The forest was quiet in here, like a room so full of small voices it hummed with silence. We walked for almost an hour, just listening, enjoying being close to each other without the distraction of the others, and the reminder that we were so much less than before. She stopped short in front of me, and I almost slammed into her back. See mushrooms? She shook her head. No, but I smell something. I opened my nostrils and tried to inhale slowly. She was right. There was something else there, something different in the woods. I think it's water. Her voice was a whisper, as if she could startle the water and it would rush off to the denser brush, leaving us behind. We walked in a small circle, sniffing the air like dogs. Finally, she chose the direction and we rushed forward. The trees were dotted with scabs. They sat like blisters on the smooth white of birch. They caught our hair as we passed, combing it across our skin. We left a few strands there, and I was happy in the leaving. I followed her to the smell of water, ecstatic, almost crazed with hope and the small bundle that was building in a fire in my chest. She moved ahead, pushing through the dense bush like a coyote. I was seconds behind her, muscles pumping, face smiling, watching her break free and throw arms forward and back in wide strides. She was so beautiful. I wanted to catch her. I wanted to watch her flee. I could find no satisfaction in my intentions. They were too tiny for the wholeness of her and who I was with her. I loved her. The certainty of the feeling was clear and bright and brown and lean and hit me in my throat so that breathing became weeping. And then she screamed from the other side of the trees. My pace doubled, eyes stinging. I jumped through the bush where she disappeared. I was ready to fight, fists already heavy. I was a man then, not a 16-year-old too skinny and awkward for real strength. And there she was, breathing so heavy her shoulders heaved up and down. She was standing still in a clearing, and I pulled up beside her, grabbing her elbow both to stop myself and to take measure. What's wrong? I could barely breathe. I bent forward, hands on my knees, catching my breath. Her voice was high with excitement. Water, real water, and I saw a fish right there. She pointed somewhere in the middle where the water tore into frills around the rocks. It was a thin, brown brook, pulling itself like a ribbon across the curve in the rock just ahead. It didn't rage or wave or crash. It bled from somewhere up the hill and carried itself with quiet grace across the tortured ground, over the glassy rocks, feeling bundles of greens with tenacious roots, some pulled from the split earth and dangling under the cool surface like old ladies dipping vein-bruised legs into a pool. I fell to my knees, crunching into the early spring crusts of leaves and dirt, laughing. It was too much. It was too much. Her and the bundle I carried for her, and the water, and the bush, and everything. It made to ache and splinter and seek and throb by the loss of our parents, our homes, our words, our elder, our Riri, our safety. I laughed until I was crying, and she moved closer, pulling my head to her legs so that I leaned there at first, then clutched at her. She pushed a slight hand into my hair, brushing the branches and leaves out of its length. I pulled her legs until she fell to my side, and I reached, taking as much of her as I could into my two skinny arms, pulling her into my chest, warm from the bundle burning there. There were sounds now that came from a memory of my uncle and his old stereo, and his army of battered CDs lined up on the kitchen counter, two stacks of cooking pots as bookends. He slurred even when he was sober, which was hardly ever. He pointed with palsy fingers. Grab one there, boy. He dropped his arm and took a swing from a brown bottle. And make it a good one, by the Jesus. He growled before taking another swallow. Mom and Dad were back in the house still, trying to figure out what was going on. They'd sent me and Mitch to our uncle's cabin out by Huron, so there were whispers of danger and missing kids. I was young enough to remain silent most of the time. Mitch was old enough to be loud, so Uncle preferred my company. Even now, Mitch was running wild with our cousins somewhere outside. I grabbed a thin plastic from the middle of the stack, the way Uncle had taught me to choose the card when presented with a fanned-out deck. I hoped this one was the good one he'd asked for. I carried it to where he sat on a low stool with his bottle and belly fighting for room on his lap. He took another deep gulp and wiped his lips with the back of his hand, setting the empty bottle on the ground by his feet. Let's see here. He took the CD from my hands and struggled to focus on the cover. Ho ho! He smiled real big, and I released my breath. Oh boy, you some kind of seer or something? He lowered his gaze to my face, like a lion stooping to smell a daisy. I shook my head. I think you must be. This here. He held up a case so I could see a bouquet of hands reaching for the sky or each other, on a pink background with white letters behind them. This here is exactly what we need. He took 2 tries to get on his feet, and took a minute to unplug some things and plug in others. Then finally, the stereo whirred to life. He deposited the shiny disc, pushing some buttons, picked his selection, and then turned to face me where I'd taken his spot on the stool. He closed his eyes and straightened his back up against the counter and waited for the music to begin. Pearl Jam. Real tradish, these boys. It started with an echo turned inside out, and a small yell like a man captured. Then the bottom fell out and he escaped, and I tumbled along his release. Snapping drums, flexing of sound, and a high threading of guitar over a smoother cadence, and then the man sang. Wrapping up and then throwing off. Wrapping up and then throwing off. The sounds were relentless. I wiggled a bit in the stool, uncomfortable in its strength. What do you think, boy? Uncle yelled over the high whine stacked on deep bottom notes. I thought for a long while, long enough for the song to start to spiral back to its first echo, and I answered as honestly as I could manage. It sounds like if Gray could make noise. That's what I'd heard here, now, besides the water with this beautiful girl pulled into the bony shell of my arms. I heard capture and release, and a high whine over something that echoed off the trees growing downwards towards the brook like pious monks, all in a manner of fancy dress, voluminous green silks peeking out of their austere brown habits. How could anything be as bad as it was in this moment existed in the span of eternity? How could I have fear when this small girl would allow me this close? How could anything matter but this small miracle of having someone I could love? And I kissed her, and I kissed her, and I didn't stop. I had no way of knowing things would shift again, that I wasn't alone as I thought after all.